Let us begin by reading the word problem out loud. A new supplier of sporting goods is $96 million behind the leader in annual sales. 1 year later, the same new supplier trails the same leader by $28 million in annual sales. How many millions of dollars did the new supplier increase its annual sales by in 1 year? Let us go ahead and begin our strategy for problem solving by analyzing the problem. Keep in mind that the first thing you want to identify when analyzing the problem is the question being asked. In this case, the question is, how many millions of dollars did the new supplier increase its annual sales by in 1 year? So now this is going to represent our variable. So now that we know what our variable is going to represent, let us go ahead and jump to step 2 and assign a variable. So we'll let x represent the following: the amount of millions of dollars that the new supplier increased its annual sales by in 1 year. Again, our assignment of the variable, it's simply the question reworded in the form of a statement. So now let us go back to analyzing the problem and see what other information we can extract. Well, we know that to begin with, the new supplier of sporting goods is $96 million behind the leader in annual sales. So a key there is the word 96 million, but we're simply going to work with the 96 and behind the leader. So since you're behind, ideally you're trailing or you're missing 96, so you're going to be a negative 96 or less by $96 million. Similarly, we know that 1 year later, the same new supplier trails the same leader by $28 million in annual sales. Again, we're going to need the 28, but another key word is the word trails. So again, if you're trailing, then you're behind or you're short of, meaning you're missing 28. In this case, $28 million. So those are the key things, and we're actually going to use these to solve our equation. But before solving the equation, we need to create or form an equation. So we'll go ahead and do so as the following. So we'll talk about the most recent events first. The most recent events is that they're behind by $28 million. So again, behind is an indicator of the negative sign, and we're just going to work with the 28. We don't really need the 28 million. So now this is the most recent event. And then this is the cause of the previous event, which was being 96 million behind. So that's a negative 96. And then we know that they increased in sales because the question says, how many millions of dollars did the new supplier increase its sales by? So since it increased, we're going to want to add to that a certain quantity. And that quantity is actually the one that we're looking for, which is represented by a variable x. So there we go. That's going to go ahead and be our equation. So now let us go ahead and solve the equation. Again, we'll start off by writing down the original equation found in step 3. So now keep in mind we want to get the variable x completely by itself. Right now we have a negative 96 that we're adding to it. We want to undo this negativity. The only way to undo negativity is by positivity. So you're going to want to add 96 to both sides. So adding 96 to both sides gives us what on the right-hand side? Well, the negative 96. So then the negative 96 is going to simplify with the positive 96, leaving us simply with x. And then on the left-hand side, we're going to have 96 positive and 28 negative. So keep in mind that addition is commutative. So a cool little trick that we can do here is we could rearrange the order. So since we are adding the negative 28 plus the 96, the law of commutativity says we could rearrange the order to give us 96 plus a negative 28. And now, adding a negative, well, that's simply the same thing as subtraction. So we have 96 minus 28 is equal to x. And again, that's because a plus, a minus, is the same thing as simply subtraction. So all we really need to do is subtract 28 from 96. So we'll go ahead and do that off to the side. We're going to have 96. We're going to subtract from that 28. So we're going to end up with 6 minus 8. We can't do that, so we have to borrow from the 9 next door, which becomes an 8, turning our 6 into a 16. So 16 minus 8 gives us 8. And then 8 minus 2 gives us a 6. So we end up with 68. So now we know that 68 is equal to x. So now that we have solved for our variable, let us go ahead and state the conclusion clearly. Since the question was how many millions of dollars did the new supplier increase its annual sales by in 1 year, we're going to state our conclusion as the following. The new supplier increased its annual sales in 1 year by 68 million. So now let us go ahead and check the result. We'll start off by bringing down the original equation found in step 3. So that's negative 28 is equal to negative 96 plus x. But we know the value of x to be 68, so we're going to go ahead and substitute that into place. Everything else will remain exactly the same. So now what we have to do on the right-hand side is simplify these two values, but everything on the left we'll just go ahead and bring down since there's nothing to simplify there. So now what we have here is a negative value added to a positive value. So what we're going to want to do is take the absolute value of both. So we'll have the absolute value of negative 96, which is equal to 96, and the absolute value of 68, which is simply equal to 68. And now we're going to subtract the smaller from the bigger. So we're going to do 96 minus 68. So starting off with 6 minus 8, we can't do that, so we have to borrow from the 9 next door, which becomes now an 8, turning our 6 into a 16. So 16 minus 8 is 8. 8 minus 6 gives us a 2, and then therefore we end up with a 28. However, keep in mind that the bigger value was the 96, which came from taking the absolute value of a negative 96. So that means our solution is going to be a negative 28, since the bigger one always wins. So we end up with negative 28 is equal to negative 28. This is a true statement, so that verifies that our solution is correct.